You're probably going to have some like audio tick you don't know. You might be an person.
I am sometimes, yeah. But fun fact though, hey, I just did the I was reading a story to one of the students that I work with in 3rd grade, and he goes, "You have a good reading voice." So I hope that comes out of me. So
I've been teaching, Mark, for what's going to be a dozen years. I don't think anyone's ever told me, "You've got a really good reading voice, Mr. Parmalee." I would have liked that compliment.
I'm Hunter Pence, and you're listening to the Misplay podcast. Oh, yeah.
Hello, and welcome to the Misplay, where we
don't remember all the rules of the game after being taught it for maybe 30 minutes.
My name is Mark.
My name is Jason, and today we are joined by the artist of our game, Zeta Gaston. Hello.
Hello. I'm very nervous to be here, but super excited. Thank you for inviting me to this podcast.
Your misplay was something that you actually didn't catch, and I caught it. Because after being shown how to play Under One Sky, you took the game home to play with your friend AJ, and AJ was super nice, and they filmed the game so that we could see how you were playing it. And it was so interesting to watch. One of the things I had pointed out to you guys was you were playing the game all wrong.
Right.
Look, you're calling this your misplay, and I appreciate you falling on the sword, but it's probably my fault, Mark, as the game teacher. I didn't explain it well enough that you needed to hold the constellation card upside down from your perspective. And it's something later on when we talk about the art we hope is now solved.
Right. It's also me wanting to be on the spot. I wanted to impress you and still wanted to be the artist for the game as you were introducing the game to me. I should have asked more questions on the spot when we were playing it here, but now I do understand the game, which is great.
Safe to say, we were impressed by not only your artwork, but your willingness to work with us and muddle along and stumble through together along developing the art for Under One Sky. Tell us a little bit about your background, how you got into art, and a little bit about your process and a little bit about your style.
I actually never fully got into art until after high school. We were required to do a senior project to pass high school, and I just thought of the easiest way to do it. And something that I really liked to do was art, but I never took it seriously then. So I went into this small animation company, and I just fell in love with the way that they created their art, and I was so fascinated by it. And it was all digital art, and they also had traditional art. My mom's side, all medical people. My dad's side has a lot of creatives. So I felt a little torn, but I did feel myself leaning into more of the creative side. So I attended SF State and pursued a major in studio art, and that is where I developed a lot of my knowledge, and a lot of those knowledge that I learned from SF State, I applied into the game and the way that I chose colors and the art style and all of that fun stuff.
We said very early on in this process that art was always going to be what we felt was our Achilles. We can't draw. We can't paint. You're telling me you didn't really get into it until around college, but growing up, was painting something that you did a lot?
Actually, no. I grew up in a very Filipino traditional household where I was meant to do something in the medical field and pursue something in the medical field because, quote unquote, it pays more and there's more direction in life with it rather than pursuing something fun and creative. I chose that, and I'm very happy that I did.
That's so interesting. I'm trying to think of if somebody just picks up Brazilian dance fighting 2 years ago, Mark, and is like super good at it. I'm really impressed at how great her art is for not being someone who was super into it when they were young.
The lesson I want to take from that is there's still a chance for us. I don't believe that's true. We're going to let you carry the artistic load for us.
So we're going to tell that story in just a minute, how we ended up meeting Zeta and the work that she has put into the game to create the art as wonderful as it is. But before we do that, this week's episode is brought to you by Board Game Casual. Board Game Casual is a YouTube channel welcoming people into the board game hobby with video reviews, recommendations, unboxings, tips for accessorizing on a budget, and more. One of the first things I ever loved about Board Game Casual was their video shorts, and they were called Name That Game Challenge. And in these videos, Board Game Casual would show a quick shot of a board game cover zoomed in, and then you had to guess the game. And admittedly, I am, and will forever be terrible at this. Yet, I still found it really fun to watch. And I hope one day, Zeta, your art is in a Board Game Casual Name That Game challenge. Give Board Game Casual a view at Board Game Casual on YouTube, at Board Game Casual channel.
The Thing.
I want to get to Zeta as quickly as possible here, but I do think for the audience, I think it's really important that we tell the story of how we got here with art. And I'll try to do it briefly. When we were ready for art, the first place I went and spoke to somebody was somebody that I saw on Reddit a long time ago. I had bookmarked their page. I really liked their art style. And I reached out to them first and I said, hey, we're finally in a position where we're ready to talk about art. We don't know what we're doing yet. Would you meet with me? They met with me. We had a great phone call. They gave me a quote back, and I looked at the quote and I said, it doesn't feel right for us. I'm sure everything that they were doing was by the book. It was a little bit more than we wanted to pay, and it didn't feel like we had a lot of flexibility. We're going to talk a lot about that with Zeta as being one of the bonuses for us, is how flexible she was. But we felt like, I don't know if we're going to be able to get it done. I think for new board game designers, the contract just kind of wasn't in our favor. Then we got a referral from somebody that we know very well, Mike C., who's working on his game Avarice, and he met somebody at a convention named Mark Gagne. So we reached out to Mark. Mark is a super great artist and graphic designer, and there was so much work on his website that we really liked. And we set up a very flexible contract, because I don't think we were in a position where we wanted to pay X amount up front. Mark was so great with us, understanding the position we were in, and we set up a plan where we would pay for a piece as we go. So the first thing Mark was going to design was the cover. And Mark jumped into it right away and started making some covers. One of those I still hold on to. It's very dear to me, with the grid up in the sky. Then Mark started producing some additional covers for us to look at. And I take all of this blame, all of this heat. I got lost in the process because I don't think I was ever able to tell Mark clearly what I wanted. I don't know if I knew what I wanted until I ended up seeing it. But I think that was one of the problems that we had early on in the art process, was we weren't really sure where we were going.
I think that's really accurate, that we didn't know where we were going. We didn't know what we wanted. And I think some of that was maybe a little bit of a slide into an overemphasis on business, systems, timeline, because in really focusing on those aspects and the contracts and the logistics, we kind of let the theme run away from us in what we were pursuing in the art. Good news, Jason. I bet if you were to send Mark Gagne an email, I bet you could buy a print of the box cover that you liked, and you should.
It's definitely going to go up on our office when we have an office. Misplay Games. So after kind of going back and forth on a lot of different covers, myself and the team never felt like we were quite landing where we wanted to land. And I was walking through the hallway of the school, and I remember looking at some artwork over the last couple of years in different places in the school. We have an after-school teacher here at the school and a para-educator who I knew was an artist, and I didn't know if they'd ever done anything for a board game, though. But I knew I really liked their art because I've seen it several times. And I remember, and I'll ask Zeta to pick up, but I walked by you one day and I said, hey, I got an idea. Are you willing to just do a mock-up for us? I have this idea for a board game cover. It's looking up into the sky, there's stars. I really wanted to see something that was different from everything that we were currently looking at. And Zeta said,
Yes, I'm so down, but I gotta go to my next student right now.
That was exactly right. It was a very quick, in-passing conversation, but I could tell right away she was interested. I was excited. Okay, so off you went.
So tell us, what description did Jason give for the mock-up that he wanted, and how did you approach it, and what did you think about the theme and the pitch of the game?
I don't quite remember how he pitched the actual game, but we traded phone information and he sent me a link to the YouTube video that promotes the game and sent me some screenshots of the tiles and the board game, I just envisioned a lot of really fun and playful things in my head, and I was already hooked on it from seeing how the game is played and just the story behind it. And I think when Jason was describing it on the YouTube video, the first line that got me was, imagine looking up at the sky with your friend. My brain just took it into a very story-like thing, and I love colors, so picturing it in my head was very fun, and I was really excited to start on it.
And so when I got the mock-up back from you, it wasn't even completed. In fact, I think if you remember, you wanted to like keep working on it. You wanted to like keep making some changes to it. And I was like, you've done way more than I thought you would be willing to do. And I knew right away, after seeing the first two mock-ups that you sent me, I knew right away that I hadn't even talked to Mark yet. Mark didn't even know I was doing this. I felt I was like going behind his back a little bit. Nobody on the team really knew that I was reaching out and kind of exploring this other avenue. I had just went to Game Market West and we had people vote on the old covers and people were split. And I was like, I want to just see one other example. I want one other look at what this cover could be. And then I saw Zeta's work and I said, okay, that's what it's going to be. Now, the first thing you drew for us, Zeta, that's not the cover of our game. We didn't end up selecting that as what we wanted, but we all loved it. And I will say to people who are listening, if you go into our Discord, one of the things that Zeta put together was an evolution of all of her work. And you can see the very first cover she created for us, and you can see what will be the cover of the box at the end. So I think we pretty quickly put together a contract. We met at a Pete's. We sat down, we talked about it. I kind of gave you a fuller vision of what we were looking for, that there were going to be a game board, a logo, constellation cards, star charts. Tell me why this was something that you wanted to do.
Knowing that art is something that's hard to make money off of, I've always done art because I love to do it. And for me, getting my name out there was the goal. And from the get-go, from what you told me, even if this game doesn't make it out and sell a lot, I think just being able to say, hey, my name is out there and people see it is the goal for me. And I'm very glad that I said yes to it.
We're the ones who are glad. You know, the thing that stood out to me, and I don't know if I've expressed it to you, maybe in some text messages, but the thing that really stood out to me was, and I said this to Mark, I said, Zeta is like into this. Like, she has passion for this. She really wants to be a part of this project. And that was the thing that I think was the most heartwarming for me. I think even if I didn't like your art, I would have loved that sentiment and that feeling, but I love the art as well.
The first version that you put in the evolution chart that you sent us, I think that's the first thing of your art for the game that I saw. And I've told Jason subsequently and probably early on that I'm going to buy a print of it. So let's start there. Take us through a little bit of the design. I know Jason has always been concerned about the font of the cover. I loved this font too. So take us through the composition of the first version.
Knowing that there were stars and space involved, I wanted to give it a very magical feel. So that's why that font is the way it is. And at the top, you see galaxy swirls. And when I think of galaxy, there's blues and purples and just a bunch of, I think of the genie when I thought about making this, just magical and cloudy and swirly. And I just threw it all together. And I also envisioned a sunset in it, and the trees on the side just frames the title altogether. And composition wise, I think it was visually appealing to me, and that's when I was finally happy to send it out as the first mock-up of the cover.
It actually also reminds me of my last summer trip. I went to Mount Shasta and I went and caught a sunset at Mount Shasta through the trees. Now that you're saying it that way, I'm seeing that moment back up in the mountains.
I took a photo outside my house one day and I sent it to Zeta and I said, it's exactly like the colors you drew.
And then, of course, like everything in what we're doing for the board game, the rule book, the art is no exception. We started talking through different ways to like make subtle changes to hold on to all of the really stunning elements that you had and move towards, I would imagine, what Jason views as like a more traditional board game box, because in our discussions, I remember the discussion of, man, I'm going to put that on my wall and it looks great. And Jason's like, it's not quite a board game box yet. So what went through your mind, and how did the design change as we went from beautiful print to beautiful print with those elements, and we're trying to move towards kind of the product design versions?
I think it's changed when manufacturing problems were brought up, and replicating fonts would be a problem for the rule book and etc. So I leaned towards a simpler font that you could find on Google that we'd be able to use throughout the entire thing. And then I think the next issue was it was too colorful and we were limited to a color palette. So that's when I tried to make things more monochromatic. It used a lot of the same colors value, from the lightest of the purples to the darkest of the purples. And we made a couple versions of that monochromatic scheme for the background, from the purples into the blue-greens that we had for the very first mock-ups of the cover for the game.
And I think at that point, I said, this is the cover. Let's start working on the star charts and the constellations. And you started working on those. And I really loved the early constellation cards where you had when at the time we were going to leave a space for people to name them, and you had the title space coming in from different directions. Tell me what you were using as inspiration as you started building out those constellation and star charts.
From what I remember, you sent me an image of, it was a neon pink cover of something, and you said that you really liked the colors on it and just visually how it looked. So I took those sharp lines and bright colors from that image and I just translated it onto the back of the constellation cards, just how the flow of those sharp edges, and you could see the transitions of those colors, and that's what inspired me to create our first renditions of those cards.
I was listening to the K-pop with my kids, and a picture came up in my car of an album, I think, and that's what I had sent to you. And so when you finish with that, when you finish those constellations and those star charts, I took that and I took the cover and I printed everything out and I made another prototype with this art. You took the tiles that one of our listeners had created for us. His name is Tor, and you adapted them just a little bit where we kept, his, I don't know art words, symmetry, his general concept of what the cards, shapes, and then you kind of put it in your style. And I took all of that and I printed it. I made a prototype. I took it to a meetup to play it. And Mark, this is where I went off the rails again. I remember saying, this is beautiful art. I don't know if it's a board game cover box pieces. And that is when I reached back out to Zeta and I said, I love this. This looks great. But just like I felt before where I wanted to see one more version, I said to her, let's try it one more way. And I showed her this art style that I really like. And I would compare it to something to like Zelda Breath of the Wild, like that sort of art style. And I sent that to her. And then she created something that I more than loved. And I was like, this has to be it. This is it. This is the direction we have to go. This feels like board game art and not just really good art. How did it feel when you had created that thing and you had done all of that work? And I said to you, and this is part of being, I'm probably in the wrong, even looking at the contract. How did you feel knowing that we were going to kind of redo everything in a different style?
Honestly, I was a little frustrated because I spent a lot of time making a lot of the versions and playing around with the colors of the game. And I ranted to AJ about it quite a lot. But I was also very scared because the way that I draw isn't cartoony. I loved drawing very realistically, and again, never worked with board games or really look at them in detail. So it was a very different pivot for me, creating a landscape from our first versions into something that's more flat and less dimensions and less realistic. But I guess we made the right choice there, even though it was very frustrating.
I'll have you know, when Jason showed me that more recent version, the revision, as I was personally resistant to it because I'm on Team Zeta. I was like, why can't we just be the really beautiful art, and I really don't care how other board gamers are going to perceive it.
There's got to be a but in there somewhere, Mark.
But you know what? Sometimes our crazy ideas turn out to be the best ones because we ended up somewhere where we're really, really happy with it.
And this is where we got really, really lucky to have somebody with Zeta's flexibility, because she never even expressed that to me at the time. She never said that she was a little frustrated. And I love that she's able to share that right now with us and with our audience. But her flexibility and willingness to do that, I mean, it's what we needed, because we didn't know what we wanted until we saw what we wanted. And the first time I saw that observatory that you put on the box, I was like, that is perfect. That wasn't even in the first mock-up version.
So after you said, hey, can we try the front cover again? I was like, yeah, for sure. And then I think the next day you said something, can you put in a telescope or a person looking at the telescope, or can you put an observatory? And then I was ranting to AJ about it, and I was like, how am I going to incorporate this into the board? I don't want to distract by adding more elements into it. And I think I settled for the observatory because it's the most simplest to draw, and you can tell what it is from the distance that we're looking at from like the entire landscape. And it just made the most sense to me to choose that one instead of a really, really tiny telescope or a person looking at that telescope from the distance from how the front cover looks.
I'll jump us ahead a little bit, because for the Kickstarter image that you created for us, that is going to be our, follow our game, sign up, and you put a telescope outside the observatory. How did you come back to that?
I think I just wanted it to fill in a space, honestly. I don't think I wanted to put that telescope there, but it looked too blank. And after adding that in, I just thought it just tied the whole thing together, and it just made sense to add it in, because from that distance it would make sense, right? If you're walking up the path to the observatory, there might be a telescope out there for people to come and look at.
So after we kind of really finally locked in what the cover was going to be, we then went and we tackled the tiles. Again, you took Tor's original art style and then put your twist on it to match what is now the cover and the art style in the game. And then we redid the star charts, we redid the constellation cards, and I sent you a couple of examples of other cards that I had seen, and you were able to kind of make it your own. And I love those cards.
We've spent a lot of time kind of trying to solve the logistical problems that the physical game presents to us. So let's start with the constellation cards and tell us a little bit about the art that you did for the backs, because those are stunning and beautiful in their own right. And you came up with a really creative solution to a logistical problem that we have with the way that the game plays on the star chart facing side, the part that players need to use. So take us through the development of the card backs, and then how you came to the solution for the kind of 360 view of the constellation cards.
I think that pivot came from, I'm going to refer to it as dino cards, because that's what we were using through our messages. The flat colors and the shapes of it is what I used as inspiration for it. And I think I texted this to you that I had a dream. Yeah. I texted this to you that I had a dream about my dog actually giving me the directions for it. And I sent Jason a screenshot that I drew in the middle of the night of what my dog said to take components from the front cover and put it into the backs of these constellation cards. And I did that, but using a more monochromatic color scheme, more flat, not as detailed for this pivot for the constellation card.
We might have to list the dog in the credits. Just putting that out there for rulebook edits later.
We'll have to get your dog's contact information later and their agent. But something that we haven't talked about yet is you've put in so much time. What are you using for your creation? Do you do drawings by hand? Are you doing it by... I couldn't even tell you because I'm so unaware. But what do you use to make the images that you're sending us and that we're using for the game?
Well, like I gave you a little background for my art studies, I I'm a traditional artist, so I do a lot of pen and paper, but I knew going into this as your artist for the game that I'm going to have to do a lot of renditions. So common sense, right? I'm not going to paint this in acrylics or gouache or watercolor. So I use Procreate for the entire thing, actually. And then I also got into Adobe Fresco, which I'm still learning to use, but I do really like it. And I think if we develop this board game farther, then the tools that are available on Fresco, hands down, I will be using that. But as for the very early versions of the cards, I used a lot of Procreate.
What is Procreate?
I'm glad you asked so I didn't have to.
Procreate is available in the App Store. It's very beginner user friendly. It's a digital drawing app on my iPad, and that's where I do a lot of my digital drawings.
So most of what you have, probably everything you've done, you've drawn on an iPad. Easy peasy. That's all I need. An iPad and Procreate and Fresco. Why would I have two? Why wouldn't I just do things in one?
Actually, my coworker in after school told me about Adobe Fresco and how it uses vector lines.
Right, vector lines, Mark.
So basically vector lines uses a lot of math and precision. So you know how when you zoom into a photo, it's super duper pixelated?
Oh, yeah.
Using vector lines, I feel like you're mocking me.
I just mocking like the idea that you think I might know something.
So vector lines basically uses a lot of math from what my coworker told me. And when you zoom into it, it just gives you a very crisp, clean quality. And I feel that your board game deserves that. So I draw everything on Procreate, which uses raster, which is pixels, all pixel drawings. And then I use whatever drawings I make on Procreate and move it on over to Adobe Fresco. And that's where I clean up a lot of the edges to make very high quality designs.
That's the professional expertise that we needed, because that sounds like it's going to be important for things like the manufacturer. Because I've heard the word vector lines, I've heard vector drawings and other small dabblings that we've done. So I'm sure there's good utility for some of the other things that I have no clue about. And all those messages that you and Jason and Scott are having about CYVLs and PTQs and JPEGs and whatever else, I'm sure it's all very important. And this is why you're here, because like Jason said, we don't know what we're doing.
I honestly also had no idea about all the CMYK, sRGB, Cobra, something like that font that the manufacturers required. But of course, I wanted to learn that as well, just to give you the best quality artwork. So I did a lot of YouTube video tutorials to understand how to use vector drawings and exporting from a certain color profile that you can only do on like Procreate into Adobe, and also the manufacturers preferred like Adobe color profiles and stuff like that. And if I were to do it all in Procreate, we would have had a rougher time exporting and changing a lot of the things that were required as of recent. So that is why vector, yay.
Die cuts? Die lines, is that?
Die lines, I have no idea how Scott knows how to do all that, but hey, shout out Scott.
Yeah, Scott is I recently appointed Scott president of the company, by the way. I don't know if he wants to be that, but I think that is his new title, and he can get those business cards printed. But you worked recently with Scott so that we could get all of your artwork submitted to the manufacturer to get our pre-production copies in time for Gen Con. Now, until the moment I have those in my hand, I am just sweating. I'm really nervous about that timeline, because even today as we're talking, I sent them an email this morning because they needed some updates and some changes to the cards. We needed to add radius, roundness, corners to the cards, and Scott did that. Did you have to create something for Scott before he did that, or was he just able to jump in and make some changes?
Like I said, shout out to Scott, because he said he was about to crash in bed last night, New York time, East Coast time. He took that all on himself, because the most that I know how to do to make those rounded corners is to use a round brush and crop it. But I mean, that's one of the things that we're learning as we go. And we're lucky to have Scott, who we've made jokes about this before. We've looked at the manufacturer design guidebook. 50 pages, never read a word in it, right? It's like, I gave it to Zeta. Scott is somebody who, when he reads things, and he started, learning how we had to upload all of those materials. So we have those things uploaded now. We're hoping we get our copy in time for Gen Con. Fingers are crossed. Fingies crossed.
What was something about the artwork that we haven't talked about that you think is interesting?
Orange and yellow.
Oh, colors. Yeah. Go on.
So in the contract, I think the first deadline was April. And you texted me around noon and said, no, the orange is still too yellow. And I took screenshots and the orange and yellow is the tiles, which is the diagonal tile and the comet that does rotate the board. And I made a mistake. I took screenshots of those colored tiles and I showed it to AJ. And they were saying, no, that is orange and yellow. And I also showed it to Mr. Todd, who is the artist that showed me Fresco. And he did also confirm that it was orange and yellow.
Go on.
And I think I got back to you showing a side-by-side of me turning that yellow comet into a more muted yellow off-white comet. And I think, if I remember correctly, it was good enough. And I think at the end of the day, that same day, you were walking around with your phone asking a lot of the staff here at work if it was orange and yellow. And correct me if I'm wrong, I think a lot of them said that there is a difference, but it could be similar in hues and values. That is why maybe you were confused.
Does this at all correspond to the night when we were recording and you're like, here, take this color viewing test?
Yeah, no, that perfectly corresponds. So the thing you wanted to share, Zeta, was I have a hard time with colors. That was, you could have shared anything about the art in this project, and you wanted to point out I have a really hard time differentiating between orange and yellow. Now, it's probably something that I don't want to say we're overlooking, because we got the feedback a couple of times from players that they had a hard time distinguishing between orange and yellow because they have some form of color blindness. Well, turns out I do too. And I did make Mark take a colorblind test. I took it. It's amazing to me that you look at it and you get, and I think I sent it to you as well, Zeta. It's amazing that you guys look at that thing and go, oh yeah, I see the number 7. It's super clear. And I look at it and go, there's nothing there. That's wild to me. That's like, it's a really weird way to experience the world, knowing that you guys see things that I can't.
And I promise that my comments with that is no way shaming you or making fun of you, because that is a real thing that people deal with. I think it was just very frustrating to me that day that being that I am your artist for the game, that I felt like I wasn't being trusted at that time, right? Because it felt like I was being second guessed. So again, no tea, no shade, right?
It's interesting that that came up as an issue again, because in the very, very early prototypes, we selected the tile colors to account for a variety of vision support needs. The original colors of the tiles were blue, gray, and orange because they were designed to have high contrast and present visually clear for as many people as we could account for. In changing the tile colors, we kind of slid back on that piece for ourselves and then caused Jason more headaches than he needed for himself. We're not necessarily going to cover every element and piece that you've created for us, but I know one of the last pieces that you were working on for us, Zeta, was the board design. I know there were 2 different versions, so give us the story, the development of from board 1 to board 2.
I took what the 360 view of the constellation cards and just transferred it onto the board art itself and call it a day, right? But I think we wanted to just focus and move past the landscape stuff and just focus into space. So that's when I just threw in that nebula, I think, that we had in the back cover. And Jason sent me a photo of a nebula, and I just translated all the colors that we have from the front cover of our box into a simplified nebula that's on the board itself. And I think I had just the lines going from corner to corner. So a diagonal nebula, which it's still diagonal no matter which way you turn the board.
What is your favorite piece of art from any part of this process? It could be something that we didn't end up using. And I'll use Mark's language, the thing that you're going to make a print of and maybe hang up.
I'm a really big fan of the banner. I was able to do a lot more colors on it than what I was restricted to using for the front cover.
This is the banner for our Kickstarter page.
Yes, correct. And knowing that it's just going to stay digital, I was like, hey, let's just throw in all the colors. I didn't communicate that with you, obviously, because colors. No tea, no shade. Appreciate you, Mark and Jason. But yes, I really do love that banner, and I would totally make a print of that, hang it up loud and proud with our logo on it.
Our logo. She's part of the team.
Oh, sorry, your logo?
No, you're part of the team. No, you're part of the team. I mean, that's the thing that I have said many times, that I have been so appreciative of how you have come aboard to work with us. when we don't know what we're doing, when I frustrate you at times with my inability to do lots of different things. But you have just been full throttle passion for this project. I mean, I think you said to me, well, we'll do that for the next game. I was like, yes, I hope she's willing to do the art for our next game.
As long as there's no people in it, because I love drawing landscapes, but people are kind of hard to draw.
MMA Gauntlet's dead.
So a supermarket game.
But we can always have turtles, right?
Turtles. Nightmare smashing turtles.
Or really cute food.
We were really lucky to find you. What would you say you would recommend another set of board game designers or another company who's making a board game and they want to approach an artist? Maybe they saw their work somewhere and they really like it, or maybe they get lucky and run into somebody that they work with. How should they reach out to an artist, and what should they say at first, and how do you get started? What would you recommend other board game designers do?
I'm not sure if I can correctly answer that, but one thing that I will say is to trust your artist. That is why you're hiring them in the first place. Or if a designer has previously seen an artist's work and fell in love with it, and that is why they're hiring that person, is because you see a quality in their work that you already really like. And so I think just putting trust in your artist that they know what they're doing.
So follow up though, for somebody like me who, is essentially visually impaired, what could I have done at any point better to communicate with you how I was feeling about some of the designs? A board game designer gets back, the first set of mock-ups. It's not quite where they want to go. What's the best way to approach that?
I think all artists are very different in the way that they want to be approached. I'm very apologetic and very sensitive in the way people try to ask me to do changes and stuff because I'm a very perfectionist. But I think just approaching with kindness and understanding. And also the way that we were communicating was over text messages, and a lot of messages can be translated wrong in the way that the person is already thinking. For example, for me, I was already very nervous that you weren't going to like anything that I was sending you. So yeah, just the way that you approach, kind, understanding, trusting.
The other thing. Before we close out, I want to let anyone in the Bay Area know that this weekend, the weekend of June 26th, the Misplay, myself, I'm going to be at the Protospiel. I'm going to be at the Protospiel Bay Area. And Mark, we're actually going back to Sports Basement where we had one of our events. We're going to be the community space of the Redwood City Sports Basement. And something I know I've talked a little bit about, Mark, this summer I'm teaching board game design to kids. I was lucky enough to be asked, or maybe I volunteered myself, to, on the Sunday of the Protospiel, they are having attendees, people that don't have experience building board games, come and they're going to get a little bit of information. They're going to learn about board games, mechanics, theme, and then they're going to get to build a board game, which I think is a really cool thing to do. And I will be there to help with that process as the Misplay. So I'm really excited to be growing as a board game designer and helping out with the Golden Gate Game Makers. Zeta, thank you once again. I know that we're not done yet. We're still going to be working with the manufacturer through probably September, making some small changes to pieces, hopefully not major changes to pieces. We're going to be making, probably some small changes as we figure out what we have to change when we get this first pre-production copy back. But thank you so much for being a part of the Misplay. Where can people find you?
I promise I will lead into my handle on Instagram. But before we started this podcast, you asked me how to pronounce my name, Zeta. So when I was making my art Instagram, I did zetas.art because, zdoes.art.
Oh, yeah, okay.
And my nickname is Z for a lot of my very close friends and coworkers here. So my Instagram is zeedoes.art. I am still in the process of making a website, but that is very difficult to do. I don't understand how to do that.
I know a guy.
You should ask the president of the Misplay. He'll help you out. Scott.
What?
I'm sorry we volunteered you. Zeta, thank you for being on the show.
Thank you for having me.
The Misplay podcast is brought to you by Howley Boy Games. Consider donating at buymeacoffee.com/themisplay. We express our humble gratitude and recognize any level of support here on our list of sponsors. If you'd like to become a featured sponsor of the show, find our form at themisplay.com/sponsors. While we're here, and since AJ made the trip, we should have AJ do the bumpers.
That's a good idea.
AJ, come over, say hi.
Hello, this is AJ. I feel like I'm like in a grocery store commercial.
We got free ad copy.
This is AJ House, and you're listening to the Midplay Pop. Midplay? Wait. Okay.